Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a cool review for you from the brand Diving Armour, which is actually a sub-brand of the PONTVS namesake, which essentially is an ancient pre-Olympian sea god and one of the Greek primordial deities. But this is part of their diving armor line, which is basically reinterpretations of classic dive watches. Now, some key common characteristics and common design language when you're looking for a dive watch. Of course, you're going to want water resistance through some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. Now, for the kind of a little double feature we have today, we have the Sub 53 and the Sub 56. And they're basically modern homages to the original pencil hand Submariner and the original Milgauss. But I think they're at a more kind of Black Bay-like scale. And some of you are probably thinking like, whoa, another homage. Do we really need that in the market? Honestly, homages are quite popular. So yeah, there's plenty of people that kind of search out for these. And honestly, even for this particular aesthetic, there are some huge brands out there that actually will modify modern Rolex Submariners to kind of imitate this vintage style. And they have huge markups. So for those of you, I mean, some of you might be watching this and be thinking, why would anybody buy this? But at the same time, there are guys that actually have Rolex Submariners. They're like, wow, this is a really good deal, because I know that if I was to take these types of requests to one of those pretty big name modern modding houses that will take a factory sub and shave off the crown guards and swap out the lume and you know, really imitate these more classic designs, but in a more modern, robust package, you know it's pretty expensive. So with that said, there's kind of a value proposition on both ends here for kind of the layman and as well as the connoisseurs. So let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys. So yeah, these things are pretty sweet. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think they are, obviously, it's a great aesthetic. These are both very clean and balanced dials, no date. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of big crowns. So they really hit those things that a lot of collectors are looking for. From that standpoint, of course, you kind of do have to get over the part that it's an homage. But clearly there are plenty of people that are still buying homages. So you can't really, you know, fault these guys for kind of catering to an active market. Now, these actually retail for $330 direct, which is pretty good, honestly, considering the fit and finish on here. In terms of the movement, you know, not super impressive. These are rocking NH35s, but the good thing about NH35s is that they are you know, relatively robust and actually quite shock resistant, even when you compare them to some of the more modern Miyotas that are out there. So these are actually still I think still pretty well priced, especially considering the quality. So let's go ahead and just take a brief look at what I mean by that. Look at this, guys. Look at that bevel. Look at the high polish. That slab side. That's pretty nice. Look at the polishing around that bezel grip. Look at this milled clasp beveling. The brushing, quite uniform. This thing's well put together, guys. You know, it's not, I'm not saying it's earth shattering, but honestly, within this price point, these are really well finished watches. And I'd say even outside of the price point, if they had, you know, I could easily see them putting in a higher beat movement and charging a lot more for these, more than double the 330 asking price. So you are getting a very solid, well-built piece, you know, regardless of kind of which aesthetic you prefer. These are actually really well put together. Look at the fine details on the ceramic insert, all fully loomed, of course. That's just well done. That's just really well finished. So kudos to the Diving Armour team from that standpoint. Clearly, we have here, more of an homage to the original pencil hand sub, and then here the original Milgauss, which a lot of you might be like, that doesn't look anything like a Milgauss. Well, if you look at the original one, this is what a modern version would look like. Big crown, rotating bezel, all that jazz. Obviously, this is not what the Milgauss is known for now, but there are a lot of collectors that actually really like that look. And honestly, they're super desirable from kind of a collecting perspective. As far as like modern design language goes, this is, obviously this is something a little bit more outside of your typical super legible, uber balanced, big crown Rolex style. Here you have something that definitely keys in to a more technical look and definitely more design oriented, and a lot of little ornate details here that you won't typically find in Rolex's active catalog at this point, because for the most part they've toned a lot down, and they've become really known for those clean aesthetics, which here I think we have a great example. Some of the details and specs, guys: you get 41 millimeter diameter. It is 14.7 millimeters thick, which isn't super thin, and then the slab sides do make it a bit thicker, but I don't consider this unwearable or by any means, but it is something to consider. And I think those of you who like larger dive watches this is going to be perfect for you. It does have a 50 millimeter lug to lug, so these are not going to be for, really small wrists. Also, you do get the male end links, so it's going to extend that 50 millimeters just a bit, as you can see, a hair over the end of those end links. But they are drilled end links, which is great. Also, everything is really nicely brushed and polished. You do get this nice kind of lightly box domed sapphire there. Really no distortion because it is quite a faint boxed edge, but relatively pretty much flat on most of the surface there. But you can see really quite, the execution, again, like when you kind of see these designs, you think back to Seiko mods and this and that, but man, honestly, it would cost a lot of money to mod Seiko to look like this, or to even approach this level of fit and finish. Is pretty tough. So I'll give them props for that. In terms of the bezel and crown, you can see the crown is very nicely done, nice and solid. Doesn't run into anything with the crown. Then the bezel itself, even with the gloves, I can get nice grip and purchase on there. 120 clicks. I'll let you guys listen. That's pretty nice. Honestly, it does take a lot for a bezel action to impress me. And honestly, for 120 clicks, it's pretty standard. Now, for me, it really stands out when somebody can nail a 60 click bezel. But for 120 clicks, this thing is sweet and really is not going to disappoint. Now, when we get into the dials and whatnot and the hands, you can see there's a little bit of a different play here, but they are, pretty much these things are loom monsters. You do have a couple of different applied indices there that are not loomed on the 56 model versus the 63, which is going to be more traditionally kind of all loomed. Again, that does tie more back to their particular style. And for those of you that are like looking at this wacky bezel and going, oh my God, how would I even use that? If you look, it's still quite usable, because basically 1 is 10, 2 is 20, 3 30, 4, and so on and so forth. So it's, if you wanted to use this for dive timing or just timing regular things in your life, it would still be really quite easy to use and quite usable and legible from that standpoint. We do have, of course, the nicely applied indices, like I mentioned. Now, we do have 300 meters or 1,000 feet of water resistance, which is great, especially considering the thickness. If they would have had like 200 meters of water resistance, I probably would have been pretty let down. But at 300 meters, having a thickness this thick, for me is it meets the requirements. Could it be better? I think it would be a much more easy sell if it had like 500 meters of water resistance and was this thick. But then you're going to start getting into, they're really do a helium release valve or anything special with the case back to really be able to deal with those pressures. And just quickly to kind of show you guys the case back, it's very simple, high polished, nicely engraved there, and then you can get a nice look at this clasp here. Little flip lock action, friction fit. You do get quite a few micro adjustment holes, so you can really dial these in on the wrist. So with that said, let's actually get these pieces on the wrist. All right, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, these things obviously wear like a dive watch should. Quite bold, nice wrist presence, a little bit taller, but not anything I'd say unmanageable or unwielding. So they do fit really quite well. Of course, I'm left-handed, so I typically wear my watches on my opposite wrist here. This is a little tight, honestly, because my left hand is dominant. Being the dominant hand is probably the wrist is a bit thicker from that standpoint. But just to kind of give you guys an idea of how these look, a little bit more scale and proportion. Of course, up close, they're going to seem quite oversized because of the lens distortion. But when you get a little bit more perspective in there, you can see the bracelet a little bit more. You can see an arm a little bit more, hand proportions a little bit more. Oh, that's tight. I'm going to have to let that one breathe. But the nice thing is you can really, of course, dial it in terms of the bracelet. All I have to do is pretty much pop these in, extend it out, and then I would be able to make that fit my left wrist a little bit better. But as you can see, quite a looker, guys. Great on wrist, nice taper on that bracelet. Although the connecting pins, they are just push pins, very simple, kind of pedestrian construction from that standpoint. The fit and finish on the links is really quite good. We do get that nice 4mm taper, guys. So we're going from 22mm at the lugs down to 18mm, right as it plugs into that clasp. So I think that's really great. I appreciate that aspect of it. So you are still going to get similar proportions to the more classic Rolex designs, but obviously plussed up. It's a slightly larger case. And honestly, Rolex actually recently pushed their Submariner cases up to 41mm, but it's more of just a larger dial, and the case is actually negligibly larger. But you can see that nice taper there, which it definitely is more of a hallmark of the sub bracelet. So I think it works really well and gives it quite a balanced look. I think if it was just like less tapering, it would definitely appear just a little bit thicker and kind of less refined. And I think that in the taper, obviously, it does also help in terms of articulation and feeling quite comfortable on the wrist. So yeah, well done from that standpoint. And but let's go ahead and get down and really showcase these guys' loom capabilities because they are pretty sweet, and get to the low light transition as well as closing thoughts. All right, we'll go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, really nice loom and really well loomed on that more Milgauss style. Of course, with that red triangle on the bezel insert, it is not loomed. But you can see that the rest is actually really well loomed, and even those individual 60-minute indexes look absolutely great. And then you're going to see a big nice pop in terms of the pencil style sub, fully loomed. You don't get the indexing, but you do get a generally cleaner aesthetic, and just I think a little bit more well balanced. But one thing I also like to do here is work in some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you might be coming in and out of a building, walking underneath an overhang or the shade of a tree, or maybe just spending time in your favorite automobile. So what I like to do is kind of give you an idea of how these textures, colors, how everything is going to render in less than optimal lighting. Even if I get up close here with some kind of harsh high contrast lighting, you can see typically that would expose any type of imperfections, but you can see this actually pretty well finished. Look at the brushing, look at the way the light rolls off of those links. on the brushing, and then of course the nice high polished glossy look there on those ceramic bezel inserts. Definitely give you that touch of bling that a lot of you guys are looking for. But you can see the dials stay quite legible. They're definitely not those kind of inky black dials. They have that kind of matte satin finish on them to where they're going to hold light in a lot of cases and kind of give you a little bit more of that vintage aesthetic there. You can see, especially tying in with the kind of the dial indexing and the more chocolatey kind of patinaed look in terms of you know, the gilt like applied settings there. So you can see it's going to give you just a little bit of a warmer read, but you know, not bad at all. These are good looking watches, guys. I just, you can't really argue that. Yes, are they derivative? Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, in all actuality, nobody watching this channel is going to be out buying a legitimate pencil hand big crown Submariner, spending 6 figures on that, or I don't even know what the going rates for the Milk House is of this kind of breed or cut, but ultimately, even if you did, they would be safe queens you wouldn't be able to wear. Here's something where you could wear it, not only wear it, use it, abuse it. It has 300 meters of water resistance, modern everything, and just generally well done. So again, I think that there's a market for this on both ends of the spectrum. Obviously, those who are never going to spend more than $500 on a watch and just kind of want to get the most bang per buck in terms of spec and fit and finish and quality. So there's those guys that will, I think, really enjoy this one because there is quite a bit of you know, in terms of kind of objective quality here, and then for those of you that really just subjectively enjoy the aesthetic, but maybe don't want to objectively pay those types of prices and maybe just want something that's a little bit more wearable that you can go ahead, beat up, bang up. And you know, these do have 21 millimeter lugs versus I'm sorry, 22 millimeter versus the 21 of the latest Submariner cases that are the 41 millimeter cases. So these are actually going to be, you know, easily strap monsters in terms of what's out there in the aftermarket. You can get different types of rubber straps very easily, NATOs, whatever kind of blows your hair back from those terms. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. You know, these are very beefy reimaginings of classic designs, but they do have a nice substantial and hefty feel in terms of the 53 and the 56. It's a very competitive space, yes, but I think the price point really helps them stand out in terms of what you're getting and the level of craftsmanship that's there. Bottom line, if you guys dig vintage good looks paired with modern build quality, which is a huge market today, then these, you know, and you're on a budget, definitely give these a look. I think you guys might like them, especially if you're coming from the background of maybe Invicta mods or Seiko mods, and maybe you're just looking for a certain aesthetic, and you want a certain level of build quality as standard. I think there's definitely a lot to like here. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do it like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.